Come, spell weavers, reavers, rogues, and men-at-arms, and answer the call of adventure. Pick up your sword, your axe, your spellbook, your bow, your rulebook, and your dice, and join the forces of good in their eternal fight against vile monsters, conspiring min-maxers, horny bards, and blood-soaked murder hobos. Discover the treasure trove of role-playing games here on Rollin' Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome to Rollin' Bones with Ryan Howard, your RPG treasure trove. I'm your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard, and joining me this evening is someone who you should all recognize if you've been watching Deadlands, the Hellgate trilogy, or a number of other things. He is a 3-time Hugo Award winner. He is the co-creator of 50 Fathoms. He did the artwork for this deck of cards that I hold in my hands, along with several other things. He is immensely talented, also a master confectioner, as I discovered very recently. Ladies and gentlemen, Boneheads one and all, let's give it up for Doc Arcane himself, Mr. Cheyenne Wright. Cheyenne, welcome to Rollin' Bones.
Hello, how do you do, everybody out there? Hi.
Oh, it is great to finally have you on the show. We just wrapped up Hellgate.
Yeah.
We are still soaking up what just happened at the end there, and I can't think of a better time between the end and the beginning of preparation for Season 2 to bring you on here and discuss your career as well as what happened. So let's begin at the beginning here. Same place we start with everyone else. Cheyenne, how did you get into RPGs to begin with?
How did I get into RPGs? Okay, I grew up on the North Shore of Hawaii, and which was a town called Haleiwa. And Haleiwa was a real kind of hippie community. A bunch of, people like hiding out from, responsibility and all that sort of stuff, and, beach bums and all that sort of thing. And in Haleiwa, there was a little store called Space and Lace, which would be what you would today call I guess I'm not even sure if they still exist. Do head shops still exist?
Yes.
Okay.
I've definitely seen some.
Okay. Well, I would think that they get replaced nowadays by marijuana dispensaries and stuff like that. But basically, it was the Space and Lace was basically a place that sold various glasswares and tapestries and crystals and all sorts of hippy dippy stuff. But in the back, they had this old wire magazine rack filled with these strange booklets that were called modules for a game called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And I had read about this thing in a magazine, a kids magazine called, I think it was called Bananas? Something like that. It was like a really weird kids magazine where they had these pictures of these kids playing a board game with little warriors on little figures and stuff like that, and rolling strange shaped dice. And I wanted to play with that. I wanted that so bad, and so I started buying modules for a game I didn't own the rules set for. And I would come in there when I didn't have money. I would just come in there and just read the backs of the modules, for hours and stuff like that, and just look at them as much. And that started my obsession with gaming. And eventually, I had enough people in high school. When I got into high school, I found enough people that were willing to sit down and play it.
Gotcha. So I just have to ask, were your parents cool with you spending a lot of time in a head shop, or did they just not know?
My name is Cheyenne because I am a child of hippies. So yeah, they had no problem with that.
Okay, fair enough. Just wondering there, because I know, like, if I had
Yeah.
spent my formative years hanging out at a head shop, my parents would have murdered me.
No, 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 no. I think my mom's a good close personal friend of my mom ran the cash register there, so that which is how I even found out the place because it wasn't the sort of thing that necessarily advertised um, things of interest to me on the outside. I didn't like look at the window and go, oh, I want to go in there. I was in there because my mom was in there hanging out with her friend, talking with her and stuff like that, and I was bored and wandered around towards the back and found this treasure trove of fantasy materials in the back. And I had read fantasy books and stuff like that as a kid. I had read The Hobbit in like the fourth grade or something like that, and so I was already primed and ready for what was going to come after that. Really.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Now, what was the first module that you remember picking up from there?
Oh, of course it was Keep on the Borderlands.
Gotcha.
That's very. I'm an old man, so I was around there for the release of all that sort of stuff. I think I remember not Keep on the Borderlands and um oh no, my memory is fading now. Um, there was another one that was a huge one for a very formative one that really opened my eyes to what it could be. Oh, I'm drawing a severe blank now. It was an Advanced Dungeons and Dragons module about this strange tower that's found. Uh, Tower of the Barrier Peaks. Is that the name of it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
That sounds
yeah,
familiar.
yeah. Basically, it is a crashed spaceship. But it's sold as a dungeon for fantasy people to go through, and it's filled with alien monsters and laser pistols and all this sort of stuff, and which are strange, crooked disintegrator wands, right? That sort of thing, and strange funguses and all that sort of thing. It was a lot of fun, and then that was a big early games. I would say the second game. So I saw that those. So first it was fantasy, and I could see all that you could do with it, and then I saw that someone was doing some weird sci-fi pastiche in that, and I was like, oh, it doesn't have to be just fantasy. And then a friend of mine showed me a book from this other game that TSR had put out, and that pretty much cemented it for me, which was a game called Top Secret, which was basically James Bond, super spy kind of stuff. And the cover for that book was, just this huge pile of passports and currency from around the world and all this sort of stuff. And I was just like, oh, you can do anything you want with this. And that, I was happy that I could do anything I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, when did you finally get your hands on an actual rule book? How long did it take you to find one of those and to be able to start reading the rules? And what did you do in the meantime between picking up Keep on the Borderlands and actually getting your hands on a rule book?
It took a long time for me to find a hobby shop, an actual hobby shop. You didn't have a whole lot of options in Hawaii. At the time in the early 80s. So, but eventually, when I was allowed to travel far and out of my little town on my own, in high school, we made it to the Pearl City shopping mall, which was basically a small it's what you would consider a mall from a classic '80s mall, and it was near Pearl Harbor and Honolulu, downtown Honolulu. And there they had a hobby and game shop there that was mostly 90%, model trains and stuff like that, right? But they had a small D&D game. They had a small like aisle, like a little half aisle in this game place that was dedicated to RPGs, and that's where I picked up my first box set of Dungeons and Dragons, and then later on I would pick up Paranoia and the Ghostbusters role playing game. So that's pretty much that certainly narrows down right around when this time would be. So sometime in the 86 or something, I guess.
Yeah.
And so and I ran all of those for my friends in high school.
Gotcha. Was it like a hard sell for them? Were they pretty receptive to it? How did that go?
Oh no, I collected all the rejects, and pulled them in. Basically anybody who didn't have anything else, who looked like they didn't have any other outlets, I would draw them to my table and invite them to sit down. And I was the GM even then, because I was the only one who had any of the books, at least for the longest time. And I would just game master all these different games for my friends.
Gotcha.
Give them shelter during the lunch breaks, and put them through all sorts of mayhem in the meanwhile.
Absolutely. Now, of all the games that you played from then all the way up until today, what would you say your favorite game or game system is?
It's real hard to pick a favorite. It all depends on what you're in the mood for, really. I will say I will run 90% of whatever I do now. If I sat down to run a game, it's going to be Savage Worlds. It's not just brand loyalty. It's just easier to run and quick and fast, and it's like taking up the major portion of my brain. But in high school, the perfect game to run was Paranoia. I could run Paranoia for all those teenage boys, with my eyes closed. It was so much fun, and it was perfect for that audience, and so it was really kind of fun. Is that just 3-4 years ago? Paranoia has had several editions over the years, but I picked up the original box set back, like I said, back in high school. They were doing a new Kickstarter from Mongoose Publishing for Paranoia, and I immediately backed it, and was super excited to get a new edition of it. And they were having some difficulty. I was waiting for it to come out, and they kept pushing back the release date of the box set because they were having some difficulty with acquiring some of the art for it. Apparently, and I wrote to them and saying, well, I hear you guys have been getting a bunch of delays, and I'm a big fan of Paranoia. I'm also an illustrator who works in the gaming industry. So if you need any help with a couple of pieces here or there, or some spot illustrations, I volunteer to, put up my services. Not for free, but I volunteered to help out, if they needed to fill any gaps, and I sent them a link to my website, and they wrote back to me alarmingly quickly and asked if I wanted to do the 3 covers for the books that they were doing. So I guess they were really strapped for the covers, or I sold myself that well. And I've done since then, I think, like 6 or 7 covers for that edition of Paranoia. So from kid in a shopping mall in high school who's a big fan of Paranoia to now I do the covers for those books. That's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an experience that with RPGs, so few people get to go from seeing that book on the shelf when you first pick up an RPG to then illustrating for that particular game system. So it's cool that you got that experience.
Yeah, it's what I've always tried to do is I find the projects that are out there that I like, that I enjoy, and I have a passion for, and then I tell those people, this is me, I love your stuff, you guys are great, I would love to do work for this. It's how I first met Shane Hensley over at Pinnacle, because I was playing classic Deadlands and running it for my friends, and I was at a convention and in the Midwest, and basically I had been working on my portfolio for a long time, and I kept chickening out when it came to applying to any company to try and get a job with them. I had high expectations of what my art should look like before anybody would hire me, and and I was maybe a little too high. And the guy I was doing my day job for, I was a booth monkey and packing for Phil Folio. And he pulled me aside and said, "Kid, let me tell you something. There's always going to be someone out there better than you. But right now, there are 20 people worse than you getting paid." And I took that to heart, and I found the gumption to walk up to Shane Hensley and introduce myself, and gave him a little portfolio that I had made. I didn't even really have a website yet. I just had a bunch of art that I had shoved into a little plastic cover with and I handed it to him and said, I'm a huge fan of Deadlands. Here's some of my art. I'd love to work with you guys sometime. And by the time I got home from that convention, I had an email waiting asking with an art order. And that was one of the first pieces I ever did.
Gotcha. And where did those pieces
Professionally?
Yeah. Where did those pieces ultimately end up as far as the Deadlands books that came out?
That first book that I did art for was the back of a Deadlands Hell on Earth book. They were in the middle of that run, which is their post-apocalyptic road warrior, radioactive wasteland era setting of Deadlands. And I believe it was the back of Wasteland Warriors, and it was this giant. It was the very first piece I ever did for them was the hover tanks driving towards a giant mushroom cloud off in the distance that was forming the shape of a death's head skull. That was the first art order I ever got, and it was just one piece, and I did it, and it ended up on the back cover of that book, and then I did like 2 more books, I think, for Hell on Earth. One of them being one of them I did almost all the art for in a book called for the big final showdown for Hell on Earth, the campaign book that was like the last published adventure they had done for that line, which was called Unity. And it was the big war to end all the wars in the Deadlands universe at that time. As it turns out, it wasn't. But at the time, that was going to be the big showdown between all the evil forces, and where the Reckoners themselves strode out of the hunting grounds onto the battlefield, and the heroes actually had to face off against war, famine, death, and pestilence.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's one thing I love about really all the Deadlands stuff is just how epic the stakes end up being in all the settings. A lot of those plot point campaigns from classic Deadlands and even Reloaded, just the scale of them is amazing.
Oh yeah, especially if you sat down and you run through all those stories, it is a real roller coaster. It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Now, on a completely different subject, when it comes to actually running and playing in games, I know, it sounds like from early on you kind of got shoved behind the screen into the GM role.
Yeah.
So this is a 2-part question. How would you describe your playstyle as a GM? And then when you get to step on the other side, how would you describe your playstyle as a player?
As a GM, I like to set up all the things. I like to build the world and just put all the pieces in there, and then wait to see, much like the scientists in Cabin in the Woods. I like to see which cursed object the players pick up, which book they choose to read from, and I go, oh, okay, so that's you have chosen the form of your destroyer. I'm going to go with that now. And so I don't necessarily, when I sit down to write a campaign or something like that, I have an idea of like 10 different things that can go wrong. And then I wait to see which ones the players gravitate towards, and then I make that the story that was, and I make it seem like that was the story, and that was always going to be the story the whole time.
So you mean something like shooting a cattle baron's man in cold blood in the middle of the street, and then revealing that you were the one who shot him to his face?
Yeah, exactly. Now, the few times I get to play, I like to play the characters I always wished someone brought to my table. Often that means I will play a real agent of chaos, a person who is just completely off their rocker. And totally loopy. That's a lot of fun for me to play. But then, on other times I play characters that are like real archetypes. Like I think one of my favorite characters of late was a like sort of a Sherlock Holmes pastiche of a warlock investigator who used magic and stuff like that, but he was like all about truth and justice and finding the guilty parties and punishing them.
Yeah, when I get to play, I love kind of leaning on those archetypes. It's interesting that you mentioned bringing a character that you would like to see, or a character that you'd like to see at your table. That's a really interesting, and I think kind of overlooked way to look at running games now, or playing in games when you've run so many games. Because a lot of times when Forever GMs step on the other side of the screen, they basically treat it as their time to either completely cut loose or exact revenge upon the players for wrecking their plans. And it sounds like your philosophy is very much, I am going to be the change I want to see, or be the kind of character that I want to see other people bring to the table. And I
want to be the
like
GM's.
that.
I want to be the GM's best friend. I want to do this. I want to make the character that, I'm sorry, which way I want to phrase this. I want to keep the story moving. Mm-hmm. As a player, I want to look. I can usually tell. I have a sense that I can tell where the GM wants this story to go, and I will drag a party in that direction if I have to. I will keep laser focused, and if I'm playing like a character like my investigator, or I will, if I'm playing a more wackier goofball character, I will set fire to things just to keep the action going. If things get too slow, if people start plotting for too long, I will Leroy Jenkins the crap out of it just to get things moving again.
That, honestly, I think every Forever GM could take a page out of your book when it comes to playing as the GM's best friend and helping facilitate play in that direction. I'm glad that you said that, and it's kind of making me examine the way that I play games now.
Well, it's I get so little time on the other side of the screen there. I want to get as much story churned through as possible. Mm-hmm. I want to have all the highs and lows. There's nothing to be afraid of. what am I worried about? Getting killed? You know, that means I get to make another character. I'm all about it. Let's go.
Absolutely. Now, this next question is going to be a little bit difficult. A lot of people who've put time into this hobby have difficulty with it. But what would you say your fondest RPG memory is? If you had to pick just one.
Oh, geez. Okay, that same book, Unity, Hell on Earth, Deadlands Hell on Earth. I ran it after came out. I ran it for my friends. I had run them through a good portion of the classic Deadlands setting, and and then I ported a lot of the characters. About half the characters made their way from the Wild West to the Wasted West, and then other people retired their characters and made new ones from that setting, and stuff like that. And we've been playing in that for 3 or 4 years, and including one of my players. I had the Wasted West has a bunch of really cool characters like these psychers, which are basically these psychic warriors, and doomsayer priests, and which are these priests that worship the glow, which is radiation and stuff like that, and all their powers come from radiation. And I had one player, my personal friend, who I actually grew up with from Hawaii, from high school, Davis, who played a Templar, which was a sort of like a holy knight archetype that travels in secret from town to town in the Wasted West, judging these settlements to see if they are worthy. And only then, if they are found to be worthy people, will he reveal who he is and offer to help them. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And he played this character called Sir Kay. And when I started the new campaign, he was one of the players, and he was a lot of fun. But eventually, his life pulled him away from the table. He had to go. He got married and had some kids and couldn't come to the games a lot. And eventually, he kind of dropped out of the game. But when I came to run what would be the last Hell on Earth adventure for the people that were at my table at the time, I called him up and I said, "Hey, I'm running the last campaign's plot line here. In fact, I think 2 weeks from now, it's going to be the last adventure in Hell on Earth. Mm-hmm. You want to bring back Sir Kay? You want to bring back your Templar for one last ride?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, great." And when does the game start? And it's like, well, here's the thing. Game starts at 6 or whatever it was. And I said, but can you show up early? And I'm not going to tell the other players that you're there. I'll set you in the other room. I'll make sure you can hear everything that's going on, but you stay there, and I'm gonna give you your moment to show up. And it was great, and it's this great dramatic moment when these characters they're getting rolled over by this giant wave of the undead and these wormling things, and all hope is lost, and all of a sudden I describe the silhouette of this figure striding out and cutting these wormlings off the guy, and then he's backlit by the sun and these rays of light streaming all over, and he says, and my friend from the Davis from the other room calls out, "From hell's heart I stab at thee," and then everyone's like, "What?" And they hear this voice coming from the other room, and he strides out into the room, and the whole table just erupts and yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think that was my favorite single moment in the game, staging something like that.
That is an amazing moment. I've had one GM pull something similar. It was a character being introduced who originally was not part of the party, but it turned out had been there all along. But that's a very hard moment to pull off, and so doing that successfully, again, that is the diabolical master planning that I've come to know and love from Cheyenne. So we've got one last introductory question before we kind of dig in deep on some more specific stuff to you and your career. Again, this is another difficult question for a lot of people, I'll tell you the answer can be as philosophical or as sophomoric as you want it to be. But Cheyenne, if you could put anything on a t-shirt, what would it be?
Oh, well, first of all, I have put anything on a t-shirt. I've made many t-shirt designs, and I'm not wearing the t-shirt right now, but I have my my personal motto on a t-shirt. It's tucked up in the bedroom right now, and it's literally "Be the game master you want to see in the world."
Absolutely.
Yeah. Either that or "Spooky girls kick ass," which I also have on a t-shirt, which I designed.
And, I mean, according to your website, you've designed t-shirts for Alton Brown, so, I mean...
Yes, I have. Yeah. That was a lot of fun. I was sitting on the couch doing a bunch of just doing some warm up drawings, watching Alton Brown's show Good Eats on the Food Network, and so I just had a page of doodles, and I drew this little zombie Alton Brown with a little dialogue box that says, "Brains. Not only do they end the unbearable pain of undeath, but they're also good eats." And I just drew it up and I posted it for fun. And somebody saw it and reposted it to somewhere where Alton Brown saw it. And I got this phone call. Eventually, I'm not sure how he got my number, but he's like, "Hi, I'm Alton Brown." I'm like, "Yeah, prove it." And yeah, and then it turns out it was him. He wanted to, and then he just said, "I really like the cartoon. I can't use that phrase because that's owned by Food Network. But hey, you want to draw something else for me? Let's make a T-shirt." So it's like, yes. That's the secret to luck, kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just good things happen to randomly. It's that ability to say yes when the opportunity comes. You spend 20 years working to the point where you can say with confidence yes when you have that opportunity, when that door swings open for that brief second. You take it, you run with it.
I love that Alton Brown was just able to find your phone number somewhere.
It was probably on my website. I mean, a freelance illustrator, you got to make yourself available, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
It is not on my website now.
Was it because Alton kept calling you?
Oh, man, the guy would not stop calling.
So, before we move forward, we do, of course, have to say hello to Todd Moonbounce here in chat, and also...
Hey, Todd!
Also, James and Tony from Valor Studios are here as well, which is awesome.
Howdy!
And Tony mentioned something about... James mentioned Abraham Grimalkin, your investigator character, and...
That's correct.
Tony mentioned something about the two characters you guys played in that game kind of playing off of each other and being their antitheses of each other. What happened there?
Abraham Grimalkin is very serious, very dour, very no nonsense to the point and staying focused on the mission. And Tony's character was a massive 7-foot lion man, warrior, who you would think might be very similarly serious, right? That's the way most such characters are composed, but he was not that. He was very kind of like stream of consciousness, easily distracted, just going off on these strange tangent, sort of would talk your ear off about everything, not laconic in any way, and often it was a very severe counterpoint to Grimalkin's grimness.
It's like was it Lully? I don't even know how to pronounce that character's name. Are you familiar with Wheel of Time?
No. We were going to sit down and watch the show that's on Amazon Prime, but I have not read the books and I haven't seen the show yet.
There's a character named Loyal or Loyal, something like that. But he's this giant beast man. His race is Ogier, I think is
Okay.
what they're called. But he's this giant beast man. But he's very intellectual and will just ramble about topics ad nauseum if you don't stop him. It sounds very much like what Tony was going for, although maybe not intellectual. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not sure. No, I think he was doing a really good job of, I think, playing a character that had what you would call low smarts dice. He was
Yep.
differently smart. Let's put it that way.
Gotcha. So, in your career, you've done a lot of really cool things, and you mentioned, how you met Shane Hensley. I want to
Yeah.
actually start there and take it back a little bit further. How did you first encounter Deadlands? When was that? When was it that you kind of ran up against Deadlands for the first time?
I think I had seen the books for some time here and there, but I hadn't picked one up. I didn't have. I was. It came out in that lull period after college, and where I had moved away from where I grew up, and I was living in. I moved here to Seattle, and I didn't have a gaming group anymore, and so I just didn't have. Um, I was interested in gaming, but I didn't have people to play with, and I hadn't. And once you're kind of like out of those forced social situations like high school and college, it's kind of hard to pull together that kind of group again to sit down and do that sort of thing as an adult. And I just hadn't built up the crew for it. But the game had been out for a while, and I think I was in the Xanadu Comics, in the U District of Seattle, and there was just the core Deadlands orange book, with the picture of Jasper Stone on the cover by Brom, and it was sitting there on the shelf. They had opened up much like the Space Inlays. They had a one tiny little rack of gaming stuff and carved out in this comic book store. And I was like, I'm gonna pick this up. I want to read it. I'm gonna look at this. I want to see what it's all about. So I picked up that core original book, and yeah, and I was sold from that point on. I was doing a little bit of theater stuff, and I talked to a few of the people who into coming over some night with the promise of alcohol, and sat down and said, "Hey, let's try this out." And I busted out the Deadlands. I'm gonna do a little Wild West thing. Busted out a card table and a bottle of wild turkey. Put it on the shot glasses. So every time you get shot, you take a shot. And that was a mistake.
Oh,
But it started me building a new crew for gaming, and yeah.
so how many people did you have in that first group?
I think I had about five
Okay,
people,
gotcha.
5 or 6, which is about all I could fit around a card table. You know, it was a standard like poker table, hexagonal one with all the little like slots for all your chips and stuff like that. I found a brass spittoon at a secondhand store that we used for all the fate chips. So when you cashed in your fate chips, it made this really nice ding, and you threw it into the spittoon and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. And I had a deck of cards. It was a standard deck of cards. I didn't have like any cool themed decks. So I had but I had drawn all the cards and I turned them all into these gruesome pictures of Wild West horror and stuff like that. But also because it was hard to remember all the classic Deadlands, every card had a stat value.
Mhm.
Like I'm not sure if you remember because back in those days, not only could you have you had different die types for how good you were, you had different numbers of dice for how good you were. So you could have not just a D6 in agility, but you could be one person could be a 2D6 agility, another person could be 4D6 agility, right, and stuff like that. And the way you built cards, the way you built characters in Deadlands was you shuffled a deck of cards and you dealt yourself 8 cards and then those were your stats, and you assigned each of those stats to one of your abilities, basically from that deck of cards. And so you could have characters that were like really awesome and characters that were really bad. And then it was meant to be something that where you could just get killed off, and then you had to shuffle up a new character, you know.
Absolutely.
And so I wrote down all those card values on every one of the cards, and while I was doing that, I was also adding in, Abraham Lincoln getting shot and stuff like that.
Nice. And for everyone out there who's familiar with my first experience running Deadlands Classic, I will say 5 drunk players is much preferable to the 10 sober that I started with. I would take that any day.
Well, I've been a GM for a long time, and I knew what my limits were.
Mm-hmm.
You were, finding those limits, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I thought, I can run 5e for this many people, so surely I can run Deadlands Classic for this many... No. Oh my goodness. So, because we're talking about Deadlands and the Wild West, I just have to ask, when it comes to Westerns, and Western media in particular, what movie, TV show, novel, what piece of Western media was kind of your gateway into, the imagination bomb that is the Wild West?
Well, I actually, back in high school, back in the 80s, I actually ran Boot Hill a few times. But I didn't have a whole lot of supplemental material. And, if you're familiar with Boot Hill, it was basically TSR's D&D, but with cowboys.
Yep.
Game. I ran that a few times, but they only had like 1 or 2 supplements for it, Mad Mesa and stuff like that. And it always ended in everybody getting just going off the rails and shooting everybody, and just when you play games with high school kids, a lot of it is it devolves quickly into everyone shooting each other instead of the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I came back to it again with Deadlands, it was such an evocative setting initially, right? Already all on its own. But that whole spaghetti western with meat catchphrase reminded me of all the movies that I loved at the time, particularly Clint Eastwood's The Outlaw Josie Wales. Was a big influence on me at the time, and I loved that movie and all the characters in it, and Chief Dan George, the old Indian Codger in that one was one of my favorite characters of all time. I have a piece of rock candy, but it's not for eating, only for looking through. I loved all of that stuff, and so I wanted to have all the chance to do all those voices at the table and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, the Western movie that I remember particularly catching my my fancy early on was The War Wagon with John Wayne.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of my favorites. That and Big Jake were the 2 kind of big ones that got me into Westerns, because my dad was a huge John Wayne fan. And I actually remember when I first had Shane on the show talking with him about Big Jake, and that's apparently one of his favorites as well. And I think that if you added some supernatural elements and maybe like had a Herod as part of the bad guy posse, or someone who does some kind of weird magic or something like that, you could weirdify the story of Big Jake and turn it into a pretty cool Savage Worlds campaign, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I mean that's one of the things that's like great about Deadlands is you have those cards that you can play, but you don't have to either. You can run a completely straight game in the Deadlands universe where the supernatural never shows up, and it really is just about good guys in white hats against bad guys in black hats, and it still works fantastic. But then you have that extra spice to kick in, and it's just to take it to the next level when you need to, and that's fantastic.
Absolutely. Now, going back to your career working with Shane and working with Pinnacle, once you got your name out there, and once Shane put in that order, and you were working with Pinnacle, how far along the line do we go to get to 50 Fathoms and your assistance in the creation of that?
Okay, so, well, 50 Fathoms was I think the first real successful presentation of Shane's idea of what you could do with a plot point campaign. Prior to Savage Worlds was fairly new, and we had done a few things before that. There had been, but I was part of this when he I sorry, I'm getting stumbling over here. So he'd been working on Savage Worlds, which was basically a trimmed down version of Deadlands Classic, cut down really quick. Actually, it was the little side game that they had made for running mass combat in the Deadlands universe, which was called the Great Rail Wars. And it was basically a little miniature tactical game that they had cooked up that was like, wow, you can never run a big battle with like 20 guys in Deadlands Classic. It would take forever. Right? So let's make a really quick, light version of it and for the Rail Wars. And they did that, and it was good. And it was chunky, and you still got to roll a bunch of dice, but it was really quick and fast, and you can move through it really quick and fast. And like, why don't we make this the role-playing game? And so they started working on Savage Worlds, under cover of darkness and secretly, and I was helping play test a lot of that. And I was running all sorts of weird quick games, and I just fell in love with it. Fell hard. I was running Savage Star Trek for my friends, and just play testing that and all the different weird ideas for. And we were testing out adventure cards, and I ran a game called The Gilded Age, or The Age of Marvels, depending on when you asked me, and it was the Marvel universe, but in the 1800s in England. And all sorts of fun stuff like that. And then I did a bunch of illustrations for the first book that came out, just the original core Savage Worlds book. And I even did it's my art on the cover of that. And then we did, as you do when you're releasing a new role-playing game, you have to give everybody a fantasy campaign first, because 99% of the market out there is for Dungeons and Dragons, and you got to try and lure those people over. So the very first book that was put out, first campaign book ever put out for Savage Worlds, was a game called Evernight, about a fantasy world that's getting invaded by aliens. And it was this. That was the first one. I did all the pencil illustrations that were in that, I believe, because we were still printing our books in black and white back then. and so I did it all in pencil, in shaded pencil, and that was a lot of fun. And then I'm trying to think, I'm making sure I have this right. I think the book we did after that was 50 Fathoms, the original 50 Fathoms. And Shane came to me and he said, "Okay, I have this idea. It was, for this game, this setting called 50 Fathoms. It's high seas pirate adventures in a fantasy world, right? But it's a fantasy world where there's been a curse and all of the world is now underwater, except for what used to be some mountaintops, and has created this chain of islands. I'm going to start writing the game," he said. "You start doing art." It was like, just draw whatever you want and send it to me when you got it. And just start designing stuff. And I would just draw monsters and people and stuff like this from the setting, and he would then incorporate that art, figure out what it was, and that's how 50 Fathoms was made.
Gotcha. So kind of Marvel method in the creation of 50 Fathoms.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, it was initially, I think, Michelle's idea, his Shane's wife. He did the basic concept, the basic plot writing, and it is a masterpiece of a plot point campaign. Where these are all the things that are going to happen, but these things only trigger when people come if they've done the ones before it, and when they come to this dock. And if they've cleared the missions in front of this one, fire off this mission, kind of thing. And that's the way the plot point was designed, and it has been. It's way more different than what you see in most other campaign books, because it's where everything is like the players have to go here, and now they have to go here, and stuff like that. And no, this one's like, no, you just lay the seeds for all the story. The story is there, and the players, they'll discover it. And they might do something with it, or they might not. You don't know. But here it all is. And that's a lot of how I was already running my games initially. Like I said, I lay all my pieces out and see which ones they pick up and play with, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that I've kind of, I guess, picked up by osmosis, just from, reading a lot of these Pinnacle books. The way I like to run games is I set an event in motion. The example I always give is there's a lord who is going to cross the river and go into this next town. He's going to completely subjugate it, and he's going to use this as a stepping stone to continue his march towards the sea so he can expand his empire. And then you throw the players into the scenario of they're in the first town, the first domino that he's going to knock over. How do they react to those circumstances that have been set in motion, and what does that kind of ripple out into? That's the way that I approach a lot of my campaigns, and it's different.
Yeah.
But it also takes a lot from that idea of, depending on what the players do, that'll depend on the different outcomes that can happen in this world as events have been set in motion in a particular direction, and what happens when someone throws a wrench in that.
Right. Oh yeah, there is a great book called another game, role-playing game called Monster of the Week, and it's a powered by Apocalypse game. And they have this whole section about writing an adventure, which I really liked, and I took a lot of notes from. I have never run the game itself, but I took a lot of notes from this. And it was basically advising you to sit down and write the timeline as if the players never get involved. Right? And it's just like, the concept is, if the players never get involved in this story, the world ends. And here's how. Right? Step one. What does the bad guy want? What is he trying to do to get it? And basically, and it tells you to break it down into I think they call it. They use the framing of mourning, dawn to midnight, right? At dawn, it is the villain wakes up and he begins his plan, and then by midnight, it will be the end of the world as we know it. His master, he will have taken over. He will have achieved everything he's wanted, and this is how the world ends. Right? And they don't mean literally it all happens in one day, but there's just like a breaking it at like dawn, noon, nightfall, twilight, nightfall, midnight, right? And in this arc, this is what the villain is going to do. And the players, and then you write it as if they were not even in the story at all. And then have your players experience the first few moments of it and how they act to try and stop the progression that you clearly know what's going to happen is where the adventure comes in from, basically, where they interpose themselves so that you always know what the villain's plan is, and the villain's plan never should include what the heroes are going to do. They're forced to react to what the heroes do, but their plan should not rely on them. The villain would rather prefer the heroes never existed, right?
Right. I really like that, and one of the main reasons why I like that specific illustration that you pulled out there is its reliance on the clock imagery. Because one of my favorite artifacts of like the atomic age is the idea of the Doomsday Clock.
Right. Yeah.
I remember I was 7 or 8 years old, and the History Channel had like a special on the Doomsday Clock and where the concept started and what events kind of moved it forward for people. And I was fascinated by this concept of the Doomsday Clock. And then shortly thereafter, I encountered Watchmen for the first time, and that's...
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
You were perfectly set up for it then.
Yeah. It was one of those weird moments of synchronicity in my life. Just finding out what the nuclear clock was. Because by the time I was 8 years old, no one cared about the Doomsday Clock anymore.
Yeah. It must have been nice.
We had other ways of measuring movement towards Armageddon, but the Doomsday Clock, I think a lot of people had forgotten about.
Yeah. I came of age in the 80s, so I was well aware of what it was. We had all sorts of horror stories on the TV about it's gonna happen now.
One of my favorite artifacts of that era is the TV movie The Day After.
Yeah. That's one of the ones I was thinking about.
It's a great movie. Great Jason Robards performance. A lot of fun. So, as far as like other stuff you've done with Pinnacle, obviously we mentioned you did the artwork for the action deck, and we heard a little bit of the origin of where that came from, which is pretty cool. But you've also worked on Deadlands Noir, which is I love film noir. I love that kind of pulp era storytelling and all those kinds of things. But I've not actually played any Deadlands Noir or perused any of the books. So as far as where the concept came from, was it just we've got Deadlands, we've got Hell on Earth, what's between them? Which one came first? Where does Noir kind of fit into the timeline of creations here?
Oh, okay. So Deadlands Noir is the fourth setting for Deadlands. First one was Deadlands, Wild West, Cowboys versus Zombies.
Yep.
Second one was Hell on Earth, which is Road Warriors versus Zombies. Right. Third one was Deadlands Lost Colony, which is immediately in the timeline of campaigns. If you're running campaigns, immediately follows Hell on Earth. It came out a little bit for a little bit of the time, it was like running side by side. The campaign, however, of Unity, the campaign that ends Hell on Earth, leads straight into Lost Colony, and that's basically space cowboys versus zombies. Right? In space, or as I like to say it, in space, something can hear you scream. That takes place on a distant planet. There was a human colony that was cut off from Earth because of the World War III that destroyed the gates from Earth to there, and so they've been left on their own for 10 years, trying to figure out what happened. And then when Hell on Earth ends, there's events in the adventure, which I won't go into, that where basically characters could get picked up from there and dropped off on Lost Colony. And you can play out the rest of the story arc from there. So, and those were the three settings of Deadlands for a long time. And then, basically we went back and forth and added more stories here or there, but for the most part, that was it. There was no other Deadlands books. Shane had a few ideas. Like he's always wanted to do a 80s Buffy era, more like 90s Buffy era kind of idea for Deadlands. And he's talked about that, about where he would set it and all that sort of stuff. But just the hooks, enough of the hooks aren't there, or it hasn't gelled together. But he came to me one day and he says, all right, so John Goff and I have this perfect idea for another Deadlands setting. And it had been like, I'd say 5 or 6 years since any major thing had come out for Deadlands. It was after the Deadlands D20 stuff of the open gaming license and all that sort of things. And they said, we have an idea for Deadlands, and we need some early art. We need to start visualizing what this thing could look like. And I was like, okay, well, what is it? And he says, Deadlands Noir. And I was like, I got you. I got you. I'll do this. Yeah. I will do all of it. Give it to me. Give it all to me. I was all about it. Because I would say if I could run any genre of game, pulp is my favorite era to run. I run more things in that. I've run more of my own custom stuff takes place in that 1901 to 1940s time frame, which is that classic era for pulp. I guess you could push it to the 60s, but I would love to run anything in that window, basically. And so I totally was on board for that. So that was the fourth book, came out, and I guess I was already living here in this house. So it was about 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, maybe. I can't remember. I got it all right here somewhere. I don't want to get up in the middle of this. Oh, there it is. And then the more companion of this. Let's see. Yeah, it's got to have a published date in here. It was one of the first games where I got nominated for an ENnie, which is what the big awards they hand out at the big game, the big Gen Con. There we go. 2013. But yeah, the this map that I did for the US for the Deadlands Noir was actually nominated for an award that year. I didn't win, but it felt really good for a piece that that I had sat down and drawn myself got into that top 5 for a piece in the big game awards like that, and I was really proud of that. It, yeah, I was real happy with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Deadlands Noir, again, that time period is so interesting, and there's so much, interesting things that can happen around there. It fits kind of the seediness of the pulp genre fits very well with, there's something dark lurking in the shadows, and that could actually be a monster in the world of Deadlands.
And still, I mean, if you're running a story in the Deadlands Noir universe, it's 1930 or so,
Yep.
which is still only like 50 years after the timeline for Deadlands.
Yep.
50 or 60 years. There are characters that could still be alive from Deadlands, from classic Deadlands, people who could still be walking around, people who still remember what it was like, and or the fallout for what they have done could, bubble back up to the surface. And it is a setting that is low magic compared to, if you could call Deadlands high magic. Things have gotten much more quiet in the Deadlands Noir era, much less obvious in the magic and whatnot, but there's still plenty of horror going on, and there's plenty of reasons for horror, right? I mean, going on in that era, and but again, it's super moody, and it's just a mood. It's a total mood. I love it so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, and something that's going to be interesting. There were several updates made to Deadlands itself when we made the jump to Suede, and it's going to be interesting to see if Deadlands Noir makes the jump as well, or once it makes the jump, changing kind of the way that things have gone down since the Deadlands period, because in classic Deadlands Noir, if I'm not mistaken, the Union and the CSA are still separate entities in that time.
Yeah, that has all been rewritten, by what's called the Morgana effect in the Deadlands universe. But basically, they're all sort of the Deadlands, the whole spectrum of Deadlands is a living universe, right? Things are changing. And because there's actually a limited form of time travel involved in all of this, things falling back and forward through time in all the genres, history can change kind of like out from under you, and events, like in the original classic Deadlands, and for a long time, the Civil War never ends, right?
Yep.
The country, the North and the South, stay essentially separate countries all the way through to the Hell on Earth. But in the current timeline, that has changed. The Civil War went on longer than it normal, but it has ended, and it's all in the United States is all one country again, and that ripples out through all the other settings. And it's just we haven't put out any new books showing how that ripple has affected things. But for the most part, you can kind of run Deadlands Noir and just say, well, we refer to the North and the South, but we just mean it North versus South in the way that modern people use the two terms. They're still one country, right? The CSA just isn't a thing anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm excited. I'm waiting for that, the box set for Deadlands Noir Suede, if that's coming. That's something that I'm super interested in, because again, this is not something that I've played at all. I got into Savage Worlds with Adventure Edition. I played a little bit of Explorers, but that was just like 1 or 2 times. So that's something that I'm excited to see, just how this event that's rippling throughout the Deadlands books, as Shane mentioned last time he was on the show, how that affects the Noir world and what that means for what's going on in that time period.
Yeah, that'd be cool. There's also I don't want to talk out of school, but I do know that Shane has a fifth Deadlands setting on the stove, shall we say? And it's none of the other ones.
I believe he talked a little bit about that. I believe it's Dark Age.
Okay, cool. I wasn't sure how much he's talked about it. I'm not gonna offer that up but I've done the logo for that one already, and I did one of my motion videos for it and stuff like that, but yeah, we're still working on the plot point campaign for it. But yeah, Deadlands, Dark Age.
Now, did you get any work in the Suede Superpowers companion?
No, I think I was pretty busy when they were putting all that together, and I would have liked to have done a piece here or there, but I didn't. Not in the most recent edition. No.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one when it shows up. I have not.
Is it not out? I think it's out.
Yeah, the digital one. I've got my digital copy of that.
Oh, you're looking for the hardcover,
yeah,
or the book.
I do love the books. That's typically when I review something is when I get the physical book. But I mean, I've not used Savage Worlds to run a superhero game yet, and I know that's something that's very near and dear to Shane's heart in particular.
Oh yeah.
So I'm looking forward to trying Savage Worlds in a superhero environment, and maybe Savage Worlds can completely supplant Mutants and Masterminds as my preferred superhero.
I can sell you on that. I ran. I'm in my quiet home game, which I'm still going to be running digitally with all my friends and stuff like that, so I can get more people who to join in. I am intending. I have 2 games on deck that I want to run, and I'm going to let whoever wants to sign up for them decide which one I'm going to run. And one of them is a Victorian space opera idea I have, with intergalactic airship, vessels and long range communications done through Ouija board, and stuff like that, and ley lines instead of hyperspace. But the other one is I want to run basically the Necessary Evil campaigns from Savage Worlds, but set it either in entirely, taking it out of the universe that was created for Necessary Evil, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with.
Yep.
Taking it out of the universe for Necessary Evil and either running it entirely as a DC Comics setting, or as a Marvel Comics MCU setting. And I'm going to let the players decide which one they want to be in. But basically, they will have to play either all Marvel villains or all DC villains. But using the plot points from Necessary Evil.
Now, and this I don't know how much you've thought about what the aliens become in the DC or Marvel universe, but I as a DC fan, I just have to ask, would you make the aliens from Necessary Evil the Dominators if they pick DC?
Well, I mean, it seems like it would be a perfect fit. I mean, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting choice there, because I think a lot of people, again, I'm a DC fan, so I'm biased here. A lot of people are gonna gut react Marvel, but when you think about it, again, in my opinion, DC has a stronger repertoire of villains.
They do. And also, I think a great deal of the characters from Necessary Evil, when you squint, you go, oh yeah, these are all this is very heavily DC leaning. There's a couple that are clearly references to like Captain America and stuff like that. But yeah, and when it comes to who's got the better rogues gallery of villains, it's hard to argue with the Gotham City villains aren't just some of the best villains ever created for comics, right?
Absolutely. And even if you move past Gotham City, you've got Lex Luthor, you've got Deathstroke, you've got Vandal Savage, all kinds of just fantastic DC villains to draw upon. If it were up to me, I'd pick DC, but we'll see what your players end up going for in that regard.
Well, maybe you can be one of them. I'll give you an invite to the my private personal quiet game server thing, and if you want it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
That would be awesome.
Because I don't know, I didn't know if you had the time. You seem like such a busy individual.
It would depend on what time the game is, but yeah. I mean, I would definitely look into joining that if everything works out. That sounds awesome. So
yeah, the question then is who is Dr. Destruction going to be in the DC? Who's the best analog for Dr. Destruction in the DC universe? Try to think, because it's clearly Doctor Doom in the Marvel universe, right? But who's the most like Doctor Doom in the DC universe?
Most like Doctor Doom in the DC universe. That's maybe Lex Luthor?
Maybe, but gotta be a guy in a power suit.
Right.
That's part of whose identity you don't actually know. And Lex Luthor, I mean, Luthor has a power armor suit, right? In the classic things, but it has to be somebody else, right? It has to be somebody who's, hidden. I have to ponder that. I have to go hit my old who's who of the DC universe comics.
One interesting option, and this is kind of an obscure pull, but Monarch from the Armageddon 2001 event in the 90s kind of sort of fits the bill. He has a secret identity, he's in a power suit, and he's kind of that dark overlord type character. But again, he doesn't have the same status as a Doctor Doom. So that might be a little bit of a tougher sell for anyone playing in that game.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, that really is. Who is DC's Doctor Doom? That's an interesting question.
Yeah. Well, luckily, there's two different plot point campaigns for Necessary Evil. There is there's the core one, and then there was a secondary, which I've already run once before, set in the original universe for Necessary Evil, right? Which is Star City. But then there was a second one that came out several years later called Jailbreak, something like that, which I would clearly have to set if I were going to run that plot point campaign. I'd clearly have to just make it Gotham City. Basically, the aliens have put a dome over one city in the universe, and they've just trapped everybody in the city. And it's all about these villains banding together and trying to figure out how to escape from the alien prison. And if I'm going to set that anywhere, it's going to be Gotham, right? So, and I don't think Dr. Destruction really plays a major point in that one. So I could, if I don't want to answer that question, I can always shrug it off for now.
Absolutely. Now, as we're kind of coming towards the end of our time here, I do want to talk a little bit about Hellgate, just since that's how we got to know each other. So, how did that kind of come about? Did how did you get involved with Valor Studios, and how did you guys come up with the idea for Hellgate?
Well, I had how I got involved with Valor Studios. I had been running a game for my local group, just games in general. But as I've gotten older and they've gotten older and life is getting in the way, and the amount of gaming that I was doing was falling below, shall we say, my threshold of getting enough gaming. Right? I wasn't getting enough out of my games. That game runs, even now runs only every other week.
Mm.
And there's a lot of jawing and just not a lot of like focused gaming going on there. So I was like, I need more gaming. I need to get involved a little bit more with. So I need to build another group.
Mm.
And I saw on Twitter that Valor Studios, which at the time it was using a different name, reached out and basically said they're looking to do a Savage Worlds RPG podcast thing. And they were looking for people who were interested in doing that. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm interested in doing that. Savage Worlds, I love Savage Worlds. So I hit them up and I said, hey, I'd like to join your Savage Worlds podcast. And like, well, what experience do you have? And it's like, well, here's a link. And they're like, oh, how long did you want to? How many episodes were you willing to do for us, sir? like a one shot or something? I was like, no, I mean, it sounds like fun. Let's do it. I'm all in. And they're like, okay. So that's where I invent, and so I played this character for this podcast that we did called a Terrace, and that was fun, and I got to be a player, which was something I was real excited, and it was rolling up towards God, what did I do first? Can't remember if it was a Halloween or it was Christmas time, but I said, hey, I also GM a lot. You guys want to do you guys want like a holiday special? I could put one together for you guys. And they're like, yeah, sure. So I ran, and over the couple of years, I ran two Christmas specials for them and one Halloween special for them. No, two Halloween specials too. Yeah, I did that. One was Deadlands Noir, in fact. We did a Deadlands Noir story for Halloween called A Night on Willow Hill. And that was all spooky and ghosty and a lot of fun. I think that may have been the first one I did. And then I did a Christmas Rippers one shot for them, which is Rippers is Victorian monster hunters, right? Real hammer horror kind of adventures, and that went over really well. And I did the following year. I did another Halloween special, but this time the Halloween special was more Rippers, and it was like, again, the Rippers, and called Harvest Gloom, and it was all the Rippers going up against an Elder Gourd. Basically, the Great Pumpkin basically was the arch villain in that one, which was a lot of fun. And then I did the first one was the first Halloween Christmas one was the town was getting overrun with toys that are coming to life, and it was all because they're being made by a toy master that was by a toy maker that was secretly a were Krampus.
Nice.
And he was slowly turning into Krampus, and then they had to fight Krampus at the end of that campaign, and then at the end of that one shot, and then the following year they had to go up against Jack Frost. Who was posing as a wondrous scientist that had all these, with this technology, but he was trying to freeze the world, and that was a lot of fun. So I had done all that, and I was like, wow, those one shots are fun. I wish I could do more with the characters. I can't really do that I really can't get into too much if I'm doing an adventure that has to be done all in one night, though. Right? I can't really get too much role play out of one night's adventure. I want to drag it out more. I want more story.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, I was like, well, the Deadlands Suede rules were coming out, and I was playing around with Foundry, and I was like, I can do so much with Foundry now, and I got all this Deadlands stuff, and I've been running Deadlands for like 20 years now. Hey guys, how about I run a Deadlands story for you guys? Not a whole long thing. Let's just make it 12 episodes. And would you guys be up for that? And they're like, yeah, anything you want to do. Anything you want to do, Cheyenne, you can do it. And I was like, okay, excellent, cool. I had run actually a campaign prior to that. I forgot. Dungeons of Discordia. Because I was kind of pressured into it. I've been talking about this idea for a fantasy game where it was all dungeon all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I did that, but couldn't get enough players for the Dungeons of Discordia. The idea was it was supposed to be sort of West Marches style, where the cast was going to rotate every week, and I would get different players playing all the time. But we got James, Tony, and Taylor were my cast for that, and then we just couldn't line up any other people. It just wasn't. We just was never lining up. So eventually, I did a short story, the Dungeons of Discordia, and then we folded it up because Taylor, 1/3 of my entire cast, had to go do other things. She couldn't sign on for a whole campaign like that. And so I was like, okay, well, that was fun. It was a longer form. I got to do a little bit more of a story, but I want to do more. And so I cooked up the idea for Deadlands, and Hellgate came because I needed to pick a setting, and I didn't know if I was going to set it in the Southwest, which was my first inkling, like somewhere down in New Mexico or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I pitched the 3 different settings, I think, right? I said Kansas, New Mexico, or Montana. And Montana was the one that had the least amount of published material from Deadlands. It was the one that basically there's, if you go look through all the Deadlands books, there is maybe 2 paragraphs about Montana in all of Deadlands. And like the 20 books that have been published, the least amount of information comes from Montana. And that's the one everybody wanted me to run. So I was like, well, I have to create everything for this. I can't run any published adventures. I got nothing. So I had to do this deep dive into Montana history and real world events and see what I could take inspiration from. And I found the story that Missoula, or the area that was Missoula now, used to be called Hellgate. And I was like, okay, tell me more. And I found out that the word Missoula, was mistranslated. That in the white settlers thought it meant the place by the cold water, and the natives said, well, literally yes, but what we mean is it's cold from fear. It's the place. It's the place of fear by the it's the place chilled by fear, and that's what they mean by the cold water. And so I was like, okay. And then I read about the Montana Vigilante Committee and all the murders that they had done in the 1860s and all that sort of stuff. And then the story just kind of came together from there.
Hmm. Yeah, and I was just going through scrolling Facebook one day, and then I see I believe you'd posted something on one of the Savage Worlds Facebook pages about looking for cast members, and that's how I stumbled upon the Hellgate trilogy, and that's how we find ourselves here today.
Yeah. I cooked up this idea for this story. And I said I wanted to do it. I only wanted to do 12 episodes, and I didn't want to do any more. For the at least for the season 1, for book 1, right? That was the whole point. I wanted to call it the Helligate Trilogy, book 1. And that would let me do other books, but let me play with the format a little bit, right? And I wanted it to be done by Thanksgiving. I didn't want to go into the holidays.
Yep.
And it was rolling up about a month. We were about a month beforehand, and I didn't know who my cast was. And for me, a big part of this story was going to be knowing who the players were going to be. And I was getting worried that they weren't going to, that the same problem that I had with Dungeons of Discordia was going to crop up, that I was going to not get a cast of players that in time we had a chance to build their backstory and kind of like link them all together and stuff like that. And that's why I started like going out and promoting it myself in the Savage Worlds forums and stuff like that, trying and encouraging them to like the guys at Valor Studios wanted people that had all done streaming before, right? And they were being very sheepish about who they were going to reach out to because they wanted to make sure that who they're going to put on the air. And I was like, I want people now. Let's get people. Let's go. Let's get it done. And so I reached out, started reaching out in a lot of places and advertising that I was putting the thing together as far as wide as I could, because I really wanted to get a bunch of people in there that were really going to kick this thing off. And luckily I did.
Yeah. Yeah, we brought together a pretty great cast, if I may toot my own horn there for a little bit. But also, Todd's great, Candace is great, Bizarre Hands is fantastic as well. It ended up being a great group to play with. It was so much fun to adventure with that group and to get to know everyone.
Part of me thinks that Tony and James were dragging their feet on getting a cast together because they wanted to go, oh, well, I guess we have to be in it. Candace was the only person I had played with previously. I ran a one-shot for Savage Worlds promoting the Flash Gordon game when they were doing a new box set for that. And she had been invited to be in that one shot by somebody who had known her from out of Pinnacle. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I first met Candace, was in that Flash Gordon one shot, and she was a lot of fun in that too. Yeah. And so I was super excited when she signed up for the Deadlands game.
Mm-hmm. And I was I mean, as I've said from the beginning, I was just excited to be able to play Deadlands, because I've lamented for so long that I love Deadlands, I've got the stuff to run Deadlands, can't ever find anyone to play Deadlands with me, or anyone to run Deadlands so that I can play Deadlands and live out my fantasy of being a gunslinger.
Yeah, yeah. I think in the 20 years I've played in Deadlands as a player twice. I've run countless adventures, but the only times I've been on the other side of that screen, I think, has been twice. Once was at a convention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I met twice as well, and one of mine was the Demon Pigs of Cotchis County with Shane a few years ago.
Here's the thing. I've known Shane for 20 years. The only time I've ever played with Shane, he's been a player in my game. I've never played as a player in one of his. I'll take that back. On the cruise. No, okay. Yeah, still, the only time he's been my GM for any game was once on the Savage Cruise 2 years ago when he ran a Crisis on Infinity Wars tabletop thing, where it was basically a whole bunch of Marvel heroes versus a whole bunch of DC heroes, all trying to destroy the other universe. That was the only time, and I played Doctor Strange in that, and that was the only time I had Shane as my GM, and that was more like a tabletop war game that was going on than really a role playing game. Now every other time it's been Shane as a player in one of my games at a convention. It's always been in a convention. That's the only time we get together is at conventions. We live so far apart from each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to play in one of Shane's Deadlands games. But whenever we're at a convention together, it feels kind of rude for me to take up one of those seats. There's a lot of people who would love to have that chance to sit down at a table with Shane Hensley. And I feel like I could muscle my way into that game, but then I'm kicking somebody else out, essentially. And I don't want to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was extremely lucky to and I completely looked into it. I saw that someone was running Deadlands at Mace in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was like, oh, yeah, I want to play Deadlands. I want to try this before I, run it. And then I was like, who's running this thing? It's Shane Hensley. And then I looked at my Deadlands book and I was like, huh. Yeah, okay. Wow. And so I was excited just from go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will put this
out. It looks like it would be fun.
It is.
I wouldn't know.
It really was a great time. My character very nearly died very early on, and it ended up being one of my favorite moments in role playing.
I hear that he's a lot better at that than I am. I always root for my players, and I do get accused of being a bit of a softie. I don't necessarily intend to be, but I always feel awkward about spending a Benny to reroll damage on somebody on a player, because I want you to have a good time, and stuff like that. Maybe I should do it more. I don't know. What do you think? Should I have spent when you were facing down John Wesley Harding? Should I have spent a Benny on that shot he got to your chest there with that raise?
I think that would have been super interesting if you had. I was fully prepared for Clayton to die in that duel. I didn't think I went into
How am I gonna bring you back Herod if I don't kill you, right?
Exactly. my hope for that, I was like, okay, this is the closest Clayton has come to death. Like, no one else can take this bullet. It's just Clayton. All I can hope for is that I pull a Joker here, and if he kills me, I come back. And if not, I was already thinking of like, what am I going to bring to the table if Clayton ends up dead here?
Yeah. Yeah, I still it's one of those moments where I still think about it. A couple weeks after the game, I was like, should I have spent the Benny on that damage roll? I loved the idea of that actually, but then for the folks at home, if you didn't see the thing, there's a showdown between his character and John Wesley Harding at the end in this duel, and he got the first. Ryan's character got the first shot off. Pretty much put it down John Wesley Harding, but not quite. He was still on his feet. I had him pull and draw and shoot, and he, even with 3 wounds, hit you with a raise. So he's going to get 4d6 damage, but could not. And I rolled the 4d6, but did not get enough to even shake his character. And I had to make a decision at that point. Do I spend a Benny and re-roll the damage and really put the hurt on? Because this is damage that his character could not attempt to soak. Yep. Whatever I rolled, he was going to have to take it. And he already had a wound on him. It could have been deadly. But then I thought about how cool is that moment when he gets shot in the chest and he looks down and he realizes it's the badge he had stuck in his pocket that has deflected the bullet. Right? And I was like, that is a cooler story point for me. And so I didn't spend the Benny, and I slipped that into the story because I thought that was neat and not bloodthirsty. And from what I understand, Shane is a lot more bloodthirsty.
A little bit.
About that, so,
A little bit. I thought there was a wagon wreck in the game that we were playing. My character, I was a huckster. I was riding inside the wagon. Everyone else was on top of the wagon for whatever reason. They were all fatigued because they were riding on top of a wagon instead of inside it. Mm-hmm. And I thought for sure, I was just like sitting there. My character was like smoking or something like that. All, nice and cool. But then the wagon tips over and wrecks. And because I'm inside and I rolled very poorly on... I can't even remember what it was. It was... might have been a vigor check. I don't even remember because that was Explorer's Edition that we were playing. And
no, yeah, so it probably wouldn't be athletics. Yeah, it would probably just been regular vigor.
Yeah, and I got beat up. The priest had to save me. I was that close to death.
Wow.
And I was like, we are 5 minutes into this game.
Yeah, you're probably limping along through the rest of the game after that, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at one point I rolled a double one or a snake eyes on dealing with the devil.
Ooh,
yeah,
yeah. The fates were against you that night, but Shane has a great way of making that fun, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And
I've been told.
But yeah, I do hope at some point, and this is going to be up to James and Tony and Shane and schedules and
are we off the air? It says the broadcast has ended.
At some point, there was a weird glitch with Streamlabs. We're back on. It's a different feed now, though.
Oh, okay, I see. All right,
but it'll all be one continuous thing for YouTube and the podcatchers and everything like that. So there shouldn't be any interruption to the flow for anyone watching this after the fact.
All right. Okay. Cool. I don't want to distract too much further.
Okay. But no, this is something that'll be up to like scheduling and whether or not Shane's actually available to do this. But I hope at some point Valor Studios can get Shane to run a one shot for a stream. That would be amazing, and hopefully that would give you a chance to game with Shane.
That would be nice. That'd be nice. I'm pretty sure it'd probably be easier to talk him into playing. I'm sure he'd love that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it'd be great to get him to actually run the game.
And one thing I'll throw out there, Shane, if you are hearing this, I love to run Dark Sun. So if at some point there's going to be any kind of Dark Sun or any desire to do Dark Sun on Valor Studios or anywhere, and you want to be part of Dark Sun.
One of his original works. Yeah.
Absolutely.
He sure does love them deserts.
Yep. So we have kind of reached the end of our time here, and I want to give you the chance to talk about the project that you've got going on, and especially talk a little bit about Girl Genius, which you've won 3 Hugo Awards for. So I will turn over the rest of our time here to you, Cheyenne, to talk about what you're working on currently, where people can find you, where they can view your work, all that stuff.
Okay. So the thing, 90% of my day job, in addition to just being generally awesome, is I color a webcomic series, a graphic novel series called Girl Genius. I have been working on that for 20 years. We're on book 22, 23, volume 23, I think, of the Girl Genius series right now. We put out a new volume every year. You can read all of it, the entire history of it online for free at www.girlgeniusonline.com. We put up new pages every Monday and Wednesday and Friday, so that's 3 pages a week. And then at the end of the year, we usually do a little Kickstarter to fund the printing of that year's collection. The fine folks who I work with, Phil and Kaya Folio, are going to be at Emerald City Comic Con this weekend, which is here in Seattle at the Seattle Convention Center. I am not going because I forgot to get a badge. I spaced it, and I usually like to show up and at the booth and sell some art prints and stuff like that. But I'm gonna stay home this year. I still have a 10-year-old who is not fully vaccinated yet, so I'm just gonna play it safe. She's got her first dose of the vaccine, but not. I'm gonna be extra careful with it. So, but feel free to stop by and say hi to Phil and Kaya, and they'll have all sorts of stuff there to sign. And other than that, you can see the art I do on my website, www.arcanetimes.com. And that is my website, which, funny thing, that name comes from my old Deadlands campaign. The short version of the story is I used to have my original Deadlands campaign that I used to run was set in the fictional town of Arcane, New Mexico, and which was named after a mad scientist who had sort of set up shop in the town called Maximilian Arcane, and who was commonly referred to as Doc Arcane, which is my gamer tag, and it has been my gamer tag ever since I used to run that campaign. And I made the town newspaper in Arcane, New Mexico was called the Arcane Times. And I bought that domain originally to basically post things so that my players knew what the current stories were going on in the town, where they could always just log into that website and see what the next plot points were going to be before game. And that's what I originally bought that website for, and it just kind of slowly over time, as I got hired by Deadlands and started working for it became my portfolio website. And now that's all it is. You can't see any of the old Deadlands posts. But so, yeah, arcanetimes.com. You can see the art I've done for different companies there. You can also go to the print shop there, and you can buy art prints from me. And I got all sorts of art prints, both from Girl Genius and my own personal stuff. Mars Needs Women, my Bride of Frankenstein art pieces, my airship blueprints, and all the other stuff that I do there. You can get it along with occasional card games that I've done illustrations for, because I've done a bunch of stuff for work that isn't related to Pinnacle. And you can follow me on Twitter at Cheyenne Wright.
Absolutely. And we will put a link to arcanetimes.com in the description here, both on YouTube and podcatchers. And Cheyenne, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. This has been a lot of fun. Hearing about how you got involved with Pinnacle and how everything came about, connecting some dots as far as how we met. This has been a great time, and I'm glad that you were able to join us tonight.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
Gotcha. So, guys, that's going to be it for tonight's episode. Next week, we are going to be back in Nighthaven for the next session of Nighthaven Shades of Grey with the Gamertarians and with John and Joe Page. I am looking forward to finally getting into this. I'm super excited for this encounter they're about to walk into. So you guys will get to see that next week. Until then, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I am so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I will see you guys next time.